Good evening. Good evening, everybody. Thank you very much for coming to this, our second last talk of the term, which might be second last of the whole year, actually. And it's an enormous pleasure to be introducing Kit Opie, who's the senior lecturer at Evolutionary Anthropology at the Bristol.His archaeology. It's not. Oh, I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry. I always get muddled about that. But Kit has a long history of doing mathematical modelling in terms of with trade union movement, with Gordon Brown, no less, was it? Gordon Brown's coming? Yes. As well as then coming to deciding to spend his life in anthropology, and picking up a lot of the arguments that we've been making on sex right theory, and really developing those with mathematical rigor, which we're going to be hearing about today. This is a major interesting question about how did Homo sapiens, how did humanity really emerge out of the type of sexual conflict which was coming out of very large-brained hominin mating systems. And that's what Kit's going to be talking about today. Just like to say, I've had the pleasure of co-authoring with Kit from his work with Leslie Aiello, who was my PhD supervisor and supervised Kit's masters at that time. We did an article on grandmothering and female coalitions with a lot of Kit's modeling on the sort of energy provisioning that we could expect might have happened amongst Homo erectus and different Homo species. And so this will be work that's really building on that background, particularly thinking about grandmothers in relation to the evolution of language. So I'm going to hand over to Kit now and keep an eye that he stays in.
Okay. Am I in the right spot?
Yeah, I'm sure you are. Okay. Oh, let's make sure it's taller. That's fine.
Great. Thank you very much, Camilla, for that introduction. I'd like to start with a little story, if I may. It was the summer of 1999. I was sick. I had flu. Summer flu is awful, isn't it? I was sat in bed in my place in Stoke Newington reading Chris Stringer's African Exodus. Fantastic book. I suggest that you read it at some point. And I was getting right up to the modern human bit, Homo sapiens, and then suddenly they were there, and I was, hang on a minute, that was way too quick. I wanted you to discuss this for longer. How did we get here? What was it that ended up with us here? And then he talked about the Exodus, obviously, the name of the book, and how humans then spread around the world. And I thought that that's no good. I need more. What could I possibly? How could I possibly find out more about this? So in those days, there used to be a sort of booklet called Floodlight, and it used to have all the evening classes across London, and we happened to have a copy of that year's Floodlight. So I went and got it and started looking through the various evening classes, thinking I don't really know what is the subject that will deal with this. I thought, maybe it's archaeology. I'm not sure. I didn't know what anthropology was, so that didn't really help. And I was none of them seemed to kind of do it for me. And then suddenly, as I think the booklet just sort of opened on a page, and there was a full-page advert for the Radical Anthropology group with questions like, are you interested in stone circles and why they are there? Are you interested in understanding myth? Do you want to know more about how humans got here and all of this? And I went, oh my God, yes, that is exactly what I'm after. And so I signed up. Well, I don't think you need to sign up, do you? I went along, probably about a month later to the first rag of the season. It was then in the Marx Memorial Library, and I'd sort of turned up, and there was Chris, telling all this stuff, and I thought, wow. I have found it. I have found it. So basically, two Chris's. The first Chris got me into the evening class of the second Chris, and then launched me into kind of anthropology. I mean, it took this Chris, I don't know, probably about 4 years to convince me that I should go and do a master's at UCL, and here we are back at the UCL. So that's how I got into this and realized that actually, yes, anthropology, or evolutionary anthropology in particular, is where I wanted to be. But what's amazing is that this was the summer of, or by then, the autumn of '99, and we're now, a quarter of a century later, and there hasn't been any credible explanation as to how language came about in humans, apart from Chris's. There wasn't anything then, and there still is nothing that can explain the very important, nature of language. And the important nature of language is that it's completely and utterly untrustworthy. I mean, I could be spouting absolute nonsense now, and you wouldn't know, apart from the fact that you need to build the trust first. Once you have the trust, Bragg has the trust, you turn up, you trust, you're part of this. So how was the trust built? And Chris goes into detail about how that coalition of trust was built in the first place. I've steered clear for 25 years. I've steered clear of this. I kind of thought, Chris does evolution of language. That's absolutely fine. Camilla, Ian, have come up with theories about the female cosmetic coalition, using evidence from archaeology and so on. Jerome, whose office is down the corridor, also helping with hunter-gatherers, experience from hunter-gatherers now to kind of come up with that. And I suppose I sort of got to the point, okay, it's been 25 years, perhaps I should actually start, thinking about this problem. And really it was actually from giving lectures in Bristol that, kind of spurred me to this. I had to explain Chris's theory, and I had to lead up to Chris's theory, and kind of set out the problem. And this is really, I think, what I'm trying to contribute, sort of following in Camilla and Ian's shoes. What was the problem that needed a solution? How did humanity, hominins, get to that stage where they needed this extreme solution that Chris has talked about so eloquently and for so long, and the only one, I think, who has actually got a handle on it. So let's kind of start at not quite the beginning, but let's go back and then try and get to my view of what the problem is. I'm going to be talking about strategies. Now, when I talk about it, it may sound a bit like, you know, someone's kind of, or some primate or whatever is sat there kind of thinking through what are they going to do in this particular situation. And that's not what I mean by strategy. What I mean is evolved behaviors that lead to evolution by natural selection because of reproductive success. So these are strategies that are the result of natural selection. Let's just be clear for tonight about the very basic rules across mammals. Okay, so we mammals have sexual reproduction, which probably evolved about 2 billion years ago, but you know, mammals have had that. Female gestation, when I talk about gestation, that means pregnancy. And female lactation, and I mean by that I mean breastfeeding. So I might kind of use the terms interchangeably as far as that's concerned. Let's go back about 75 million years. Shall we start there? I mean, it seems like a reasonable time to. I'll be fairly quick through this, so don't worry about it. This is actually a present day bush baby. It's nocturnal. It's pretty small. It's solitary. And when I talk about solitary, what I'm meaning is that males and females don't have anything to do with each other except to mate. Apart from that, they don't hang out. They don't walk around the rainforest together or any of that kind of stuff. They simply mate, and then the females do everything else, you know, like standard kind of mammals. They do the gestation, which is costly. They do the lactation, which is even more costly. They wean. When I say wean, I mean finish the period of lactation, and then they probably have some responsibility for their offspring after that, and then they'll go through the cycle again, and you know, it goes kind of round and round like that. So that's primates. That's where primates came from 75 million years ago. And what I'm interested in, as Camilla was saying, is I'm interested in trying to trace the changes over time in the social and mating systems of primates. So here is a family tree of the primate order, as we call it. So 75 million years ago is kind of here. I'm not too good on color, but I think that may be purple. Is it? If it's purple, okay, it's purple, right? So that is a solitary social system, like the bush babies are now. And what you can see is the ancestral state was that, and then across this side of the tree, lots of them have stayed like that. But across this side of the tree, there have been changes. And in particular is this change here, which is the change from solitary and nocturnal and small and all of those kinds of things that we associate with bush babies. Suddenly there was this massive change. Major transition, perhaps we could call it. Anyway, major change into multi-male, multi-female groups where they were sociable. They stuck together as a group. And my work with my collaborators here suggests that what happened was that bush baby type primates started to get bigger, and being nocturnal started to get quite difficult, because not for during the night, but during the day. How could they hide from the predators during the day when they were starting to get large? And so there was a switch. They decided, now here's my first time not in their head, right? The strategy switched, and they became diurnal, i.e. living, being active during the day, and becoming getting into large groups. And we're suggesting that those two things happen together. And if you are daytime living in the rainforest, there are lots of predators around, and you want to be in a group. I mean, if you want to survive, you're going to be in a group, and so that's how they went. And we can see that. Do I put an arrow in?
Yeah.
Exactly. So that is humans up there, and so you can see our ancestral line here from let's say 50 million years ago. Our ancestral line through all of that time has been multi-male, multi-female groups. Okay, so when you hear a Tory politician say something like, the family is the basis of society,
No.
completely and utterly wrong. If anything, you could say that society is the basis of the family, but I'll get to that. Okay, so that sort of sets the kind of scene as far as I'm concerned, because what's happening here is that we're getting our first potential problem arising. When you live in solitary nocturnal kind of setup like that bush baby, I mean, squirrels nocturnal squirrels would do the same. Teeny weeny little brains that squirrels have. They're very skilled. They can bury acorns and pick them up when they need them and all that kind of stuff. Absolutely fine. They can do those kinds of things, but teeny brain. So navigating the physical environment is a dead cinch, basically. There's nothing difficult about it at all. Mm-hmm. The thing that is so complex and so complicated to navigate are other individuals like you. That's the difficulty. And what you need in order to navigate those large groups is you need a large brain to help you do it. So you can work out, what are they up to? Are they friends with them? Why am I not friends with them? What are they going to do to me behind my back? All those kinds of things. That's why we, as primates, as social primates, need a large brain. And this raises a real problem. Because how do females have all the responsibility, as I said, for lactation? How do they deal with that? How do they grow or ensure that their infant grows this large brain? Well, the solution to that problem from a strategy point of view is extend the lactation period. And then you can grow that large brain over a longer period, and then you wean kind of later on, and that does the trick. Except that actually kind of raises a problem for the males, because there used to be a kind of really fairly quick turnaround for the males. And I mean, the males are interested in mating, right? So fairly quick turnaround. You mate with the sorry, do I?
No, I've just realised.
You mate with the female, and you then you go off and you try and find another female that is receptive to mating and that kind of thing. And then the female that you first mated with has the offspring. Great, and then you can mate again. You know, and you just keep this kind of process up, and this is what males do. Then we have this real problem. Females are extending that lactation period, and they are doing what is called lactational amenorrhea. Now, this is not a suggested form of contraception, let me just say, but it does mean that it's unlikely that that female will mate at all, and even if they do, they're very unlikely to conceive, because the female does not want to be trying to grow that very large brain in their infant, and then have to gestate another infant and possibly have to lactate that one as well. I mean, just a kind of absolute nightmare. So the female, you know, sort of makes it not happen. So the males are confronted with this like really awful problem. What, you know, you mean no mating for all that time? You joking? You know, that's what we're here for, right? You know, give us a break. So the males come up with a solution. If you know that the offspring is not yours, then what you can do is you can kill that offspring, and then the female will return to fertility much quicker. And if it's not yours, it doesn't have any detrimental effect on your reproductive success. And then the female comes back into fertility, and you get a chance to mate with that female. Problem solved. And this is called the sexual selection infanticide hypothesis. Sarah Hrdy, you know, fantastic evolutionary anthropologist, primatologist, came up with this explanation for infanticide. That basically it's this lactational amenorrhea that forces males into doing this infanticide. And you know, this is what we call a male reproductive strategy. Okay, so you know, it's solving, you know, a problem for the males. They have to know that it's not their offspring, otherwise, you know, they're going to be doing craziness. They're killing their own offspring and then trying to increase their reproductive success by mating again. You know, that strategy is not going to survive. But of course, males going down this particular route, what it means is there is a huge problem for females. You know, there is actually, there is actually a problem for the male who was the father of that offspring. But anyway, but females are particularly, you know, they're the ones who are putting all this investment in. You know, what can they possibly do about this to ensure that you know, that they have some kind of reproductive success? Otherwise, it's just like this constant investment with no outcome from that. So now we're moving on from the last time I showed you this family tree. We were looking at the social systems. Now we're looking at the mating systems, and in some primates that's a different thing. You know, take humans. We have a multi-male, multi-female society. Take us here tonight, and yet we have a different mating system. We'll get to, you know, exactly what we might call that mating system, but you know, I mean, basically monogamy. So we have a different mating system to the social system that we have, and some other primates also have different mating systems to their social system. So this is a tree then of the mating systems. And what we've got here in, I think, red, is promiscuous mating. So this is the females mate with all the males that are around, and the males mate with all the females that are around. And you can see that bush baby type thing back 75 million years ago did that kind of thing. And for quite a long time, that was what happened. And then what you see is these changes into, I think, yellow, thank you. Great. And pink. So pink of monogamy, yellow, I was going to say orange, but it's quite close, of polygyny. And so mating systems started to shift. In particular, what is happening here is that females are trying to respond to this appalling threat of infanticide. And this is a baboon female's response. It's called estrus advertisement. And what she is doing is she's advertising the fact that she is fertile, because what she wants is for all the males within the group to mate with her, or for her to mate with them, whichever you want to say. And then all the males have a bit of an idea that the subsequent offspring might be theirs, and so they're not going to harm it. It's called paternity confusion, and basically, that is a way of protection, and it's seriously good. I mean, in the mating systems that work like this, infanticide rates are really kept pretty low, pretty good. Yes, and so we call this sexual swelling. Again, Sarah Hrdy, came up with this argument that the sexual swelling is a product of the kind of mating system that requires multi-male, multi-female mating to take place, promiscuity to take place. And we can see that we've got here closing in on humans. Here, actually, humans have both monogamy and polygyny. There are societies that are polygynous, but we won't get into that. That kind of comes later. And then I'll talk about the others. The other strategy across primates, is to go for monogamy. This is also a very good strategy for dealing with infanticide, but it's kind of the opposite. So it's paternity certainty now. The male is absolutely, in inverted commas, sure that the offspring pretty much is theirs, and they are willing to, look out for that offspring. In some primate species, the males actually do, get off their arse and do something and help out. And in titty monkeys, for example, the males actually carry the infants around, and occasionally they have twins, and they actually put the effort in, and that kind of thing, but not in all species. So that kind of works well. And so this is what happens across primates. Infanticide causes a real problem for females, and females go down these two different routes as a way of solving that particular problem. Okay. Apes. Right. So the first ape that kind of split off our line, if you like, were the gibbons. And the gibbons, all apes are kind of large-bodied, very large brain compared to their body, and so on. And the gibbons just went very, very clearly down the monogamy route. Their monogamy is different to the monogamy that we might we might think of, because what happens is, I mean, they live in Southeast Asia, in the rainforest there. The number of predators is pretty low. They're quite large anyway, and they don't really worry about that. And so what they do is they have large ranges where the male and the female and the offspring live. So it's called discrete. Discrete is a sort of nice way of saying they keep everybody else out. So everybody meaning other gibbons. So the females are not so concerned about keeping others out. They don't really want other females to come into their area, but the males are really concerned. They do not want another male coming into their area. So they keep these kind of discrete patches where they bring up their offspring and so on. This, by the way, doesn't induce the male gibbons to get off their proverbial at all. So they protect the infant for sure, but what, raise a finger and like help? No, don't go there. So infanticide is pretty low amongst gibbons. What happens is really, if a male was to leave for whatever reason, get injured or whatever, then you would see infanticide taking place. But it's a reasonable strategy. Great apes. Okay, we have a further problem for the females in these species, particularly, well, the largest of the species of great ape, the orangutans and the gorillas, really like pretty tough. So the males solve their problem here by trying to get a group of females together in what we call polygyny. And so the male orangutans who have the group of females with them, although they're pretty spread out, and they'll go extinct in 10 years. So, but so the orangutans, the male grows larger and gets these kind of phalanges on their cheeks. I mean, you can tell that is the what we might call the alpha male. They are clearly in charge. And what's interesting, and I think often gets kind of left out of the discussion, is the males who are not large and don't have the phalanges, kind of roving males of orangutans. They're adults and so on, but they're much smaller than the alpha, and actually orangutans, not terribly nice. The males actually rape the females, i.e. the females are not keen to mate with the smaller males. What's the advantage? Likely that their offspring will be killed, so they're kind of not wanting to do that, and of course those other males definitely do kind of want to do it. So infanticide is relatively high amongst orangutans, and what we have, because they have large brains, because of being great apes, we've got lactation periods of up to 8 years. I mean, it's absolutely, I mean, any women here, it's a long time, right? It's a long time to lactate a single offspring. The other large great ape are the gorillas. I mean, gorillas are off the scale when it comes to infanticide. It's just appalling. I think it's something like 85% of infant deaths are infanticide. So what happens is, the male mates with all the females. The infants, get born, lactation takes place, and then that male will get booted out by one of the roving males in the area, as that gorilla gets kind of older and less able to hold his weight, the new male comes in, kills all the infants that have not been weaned, and kind of starts again. And I like it's the male has a real problem. It's not. I mean, he's not doing this out of spite or anything like that. He has a real problem because he's going to get booted out as well. So he needs to mate with those females as soon as possible. And if they have that kind of length of lactation, I mean, he could be waiting there for decades before he actually gets a chance to mate. So, really, really, again, terrible kind of infanticide problems. And it's in both of those cases, it's these roving males, and we'll come back to them. The other two kind of species of great apes that are closest to us are the chimpanzees and the bonobos. They've gone down the different route. So they've gone down the paternity confusion route. So the females mate with all the males within those groups, and infanticide rates are really low. A good strategy. It works. And it's probably the case 6 million years ago, the common ancestor of humans, bonobos, and chimpanzees, probably I've tried to do some reconstruction of those apes, and they probably had a similar kind of setup to the way that chimpanzees and bonobos do it now. But there was a problem. And again, this problem doesn't get aired at all by paleoanthropologists and so on. But this is a picture of a female chimpanzee with estrus advertisement. So she is fertile at the moment. And this is the way that she is telling all the males within the group, all the adult males within the group, that she is fertile and she wants to mate with them all in order to confuse the paternity of the subsequent offspring. Well, bipedalism, no, doesn't work. That is not a possibility. That if the ancestral, the pan homo, as it's called, the last common ancestor, so humans, chimps, and bonobos, if they were like that and became bipedal, then obviously they couldn't carry on with that strategy. It's probably the case. I would argue Sarah Hurdy has made similar kinds of suggestions too, that there was a switch in the female strategy at that point. So females, instead of estrus advertisement, of actually advertising the fact that she was ovulating, or in that time was ovulating, switched to a concealed ovulation, and that strategy had the same effect, effectively, of paternity confusion. It still wasn't possible for the males to know whether they were the father of the subsequent offspring, and she could have continued then to have been mating with all the males within the group. Okay, jump forward. I'm moving quite fast here. Australopithecines, Ardipithecus ramidus, we're straight through all of those. And we get to what I think is my favorite hominin, Homo erectus. Now, Homo erectus came onto the scene, evolved about 2 million years ago, a bit less, 1.85 million years ago, or something like that. And as a result, it is argued, of climate change. So there were huge changes in the climate across the world. There was a reduction in temperatures, a drying of the world, and in particular in sub-Saharan Africa, the beginning of seasonality. And so you get rainy periods and dry periods. And this had a devastating effect on sub-Saharan African forests. So the whole area had been forested before, and suddenly those forests, started to fall to bits, woodland clumps and that kind of thing, but huge areas of savanna. And it's probably the case that Homo erectus was able to make benefit from that huge change. How exactly it worked, it's not entirely clear. But what happened was that they grew larger. Both males and females grew larger, but females in particular. So what we call dimorphism, the difference between males and females, in this case in terms of size or height or whatever, reduced. So the males and females were not similar size as in gibbons, but getting much closer, and the brain grew. So we've now got twice the size brain as the early hominins or chimpanzees and bonobos. A real problem. Okay, so hominins had kind of managed, probably with shorter lactation periods than gorillas and orangutans, probably something around about chimpanzees and bonobos, which is like 4 to 5 years. I mean, it's still, it's a long lactation period, but it's okay. But if you double the size of the brain, the lactation would go off the scale. I mean, it would just be impossible. An individual female could possibly have one infant, possibly two, and then you have attrition and infanticide, or just purely kind of dying off. The likelihood is, the species would have gone extinct in no time at all. And what we know from Homo erectus, actually they were probably the first species of hominins that actually spread out of sub-Saharan Africa into Europe and into Asia. So they were really successful. So they clearly dealt with this problem. The females dealt with this problem of how do you grow this very large brain, twice the size of a chimpanzee, without extending your lactation, through the roof. Menopause. I'm kind of getting to the view this might be the most important change that has taken place in human evolution, such that we would not be here if there hadn't been the evolution of menopause. So what menopause is often characterized, I sort of hear sort of on the fringes, as somehow females stopping their reproductive span early in order, and then we'll get onto why particular they did it. I actually think it's the other way around. I think that human females have the same reproductive span as the ancestral, the 6 million year old ancestor, the same reproductive span as chimpanzees and bonobos, and then extended their life beyond that. And so the reproductive span has stayed about the same. But rather than the females kind of, getting quite old and so on, and, if it's difficult for the Homo erectus females to lactate and grow this very large brain for their infant, older females are going to have a really hard time, because the chances that they're actually going to survive until that infant is weaned, no way. So a complete switch of strategy amongst females is you grow your lifespan, you continue to live for longer and invest in your daughter's offspring. That's is a very good way of helping your reproductive success, i.e. that strategy then is likely to be passed down to your daughters and your granddaughters and so on. So it's going to be very successful from that point of view, and it's going to solve the problem of that the females find themselves in of how do you provision your offspring. The only way, and this is Camilla and I wrote this paper suggesting that the only way that you could do it is that grandmothers and mothers are provisioning the offspring, and therefore they can grow that brain more quickly, extend beyond lactation, and the grandmothers are kind of doing the extra work and so on. Our suggestion is that, and we're not alone in this, Leslie Aiello and Kathy Key and others have suggested this was the strategy played out by Homo erectus. Major change. What about the males? It was all very well when we had the group size of chimpanzees and bonobos. Fine. Probably group size of about 50, let's say split equal between infants, juveniles, and then adults, so 25 of each. Half of those are males, half of those are females. So the female had to mate with, let's say 12, 13 males. Quite a lot, but hey, you've got to do what you've got to do, right? To confuse paternity. Great. Homo erectus has a brain twice the size, and we know from Robin Dunbar that they have that brain twice the size in order to navigate the larger groups that they're now in. They're out on the savannah. They're having to protect themselves from all the predators that are out there. They need this large group. But hey, how many adult males are there out there that the female has to confuse the paternity of? It's starting to, the size of the Homo erectus brain suggests group sizes of about 110. Half, juvenile, half adult. We're talking 55, half male, half female. That is quite a confusion job to have to do. And what Camilla and I thought was starting to kind of be a problem was actually the female production would have to be, this is grandmothers and mothers, the production would have to be, getting on for the best production amongst modern day hunter-gatherers of modern humans. That's quite tough. Maybe they were able to do that and have numbers of offspring. Yeah, maybe they were able to do that. The question is, how were the females preventing infanticide amongst for their infants? And we didn't address that at the time. And I guess I'm now back in the position of, I think we need to. I think we need to come up with, at least by the time we get to later hominin species. So now we're talking kind of Heidelbergensis and so on still in Africa. I mean, they're starting to get brains the size of ours. I mean, serious. This is a real difficulty because a brain the size of ours, what we're talking about is, group sizes well, if in modern humans, group sizes, according to Robin Dunbar, of about 150. So, you know, half of 150, 75, half of 75, no. That is, you cannot confuse paternity in that situation. So at some point, don't quite know where in this process, but some point from 2 million years ago up until, you know, 200,000 years ago, there had to be ways in which females were protecting their offspring from infanticidal males. If you go down the monogamy route, we're not talking gibbon monogamy here. We're not talking, you know, male and female spreading out in the nice rainforest, keeping the other individuals away from them. You are part of a large group. If you go down the monogamy route, then you're likely to be in trouble, because the other males will know that, you know, they are not the father of that infant. Now, the males are going to be attracted to the females. Here's a mother-in-law joke coming up. The males are going to be attracted to the females with their mothers still around. So the males are actually probably not even looking at the female themselves. What they're really interested in is their mother still there? Because that's the real attraction. If their mother is there, then it's really going to pay them to work with this female, to have offspring, to look after those offspring, because the mother's around and is going to be provisioning them, and it's going to be a good job done there. But of course, the males, you know, at the same time, they're in this position of, well, you know, they need to help out because the brain has now got even bigger. They need to do their bit and so on. Fine. They need to protect the offspring. Obviously, the grandmothers are going to be around, but the grandmothers, you know, are likely to have other daughters too. And so her input is going to be spread over a kind of a number. So, yeah, so there may be males that are attracted to the other daughters of that matriarch, can we call her? Fine. Okay, so now we're getting kind of, you know, a change in the kind of social structure that is happening within these let's call them hominins. I don't know whether it's, you know, how far it's gone. But what about the other males? What about those roving males that are, no way are they going to do any help out, you know, as far as they're concerned. Being a male is sat down, beer in hand, feet up, watching the football. You know, I mean, that's what being a male is. And there's no way that they're going to do any helping out of the offspring. All they're interested in is finding the females, probably the females without the grandmothers, who are not being helped, are not being kind of protected, are not part of that matriarchy or matri locality or whatever is going on. These roving males are going to be such a problem, because those other females, I mean, you know, they've basically had it. If you don't have your mother around, then, you know, there's pretty much no way that you're actually going to successfully have offspring, and you're going to have all these roving males going around, you know, wanting to mate with you and so on, even though the whole of that strategy, so, you know, leaving the matriarchy strategy on the one side, all the rest of the strategy is going to be really unsuccessful. It's not going to lead to offspring being born and lactated and brought up and all the rest of it. So we have a problem. We have a really big problem here. I think, I mean, there is a real confusion about where modern humans actually arose from. You know, did they evolve from Heidelbergensis? Was Heidelbergensis really a species? It's not really clear. There is a real problem here, I think, as to what could possibly have been the mating strategy in, you know, around that time. In particular, I would say, I mean, you know, the man, the hunter kind of approach that has been around for such a long time. How could the males go hunting? I mean, you know, what, and leave their infant behind and what, go off for a day or two and hunt when there are these roving males around? You know, they are just going to, they you know, they are infanticidal males. They will just kill the unweaned infants, and the male will come back from hunting, and you know, and their infant is gone, and their reproductive success is down the pan. So that really restricts their ability to actually go hunting. Now, you can imagine that within the matriarchy, you know, there is, you know, some possibilities. I mean, I'm not kind of ruling things out. So within, you know, there's a grandmother with her daughters bringing up offspring. There are a number of males around who are associated with those females. You know, they could come to some kind of arrangement, couldn't they? Like 2 males at a time go off and do the hunting while the other, while 2 other males stick around. They've got the grandmother, they've got the aunt, you know, the other aunties are around there. What's happening?
We've got more slide.
Okay.
Grandma's. I've got the grandma's slide here.
Okay.
Well, it's gone backwards.
Okay.
And it's going,
Okay.
And you
now
can go.
we've got the roving males. I mean, you can sort of hypothesize that there are possibilities around here. And what I'd really like to do is to do some agent-based modeling. So if there are any agent-based modelers here, I've used NetLogo, which I think is okay, but I think there are like better ones now. But if we could put these various strategies into an agent-based model and try and work out, you know, what exactly, you know, in a group size of 110 for Homo erectus, 150 for modern humans, and probably Heidelbergensis too, because they had large brains. You know, how exactly can you do it? But there are some grains of hope, I think, some kind of possibilities, because the males who've gone down the monogamy route, if you like, who've sought out the females with the very attractive mothers, they are in the same position now as the females. So there's a kind of, you know, you're kind of bringing the male and the female strategy kind of together, that they want a solution that fits both of them. Now, you could hypothesize. I don't know how much longer I have. Should I stop now? Soon?
Another few minutes.
Okay. Okay. You could hypothesize that the males would come up with some kind of, you know, clever strategy where, you know, a couple of the males go and, you know, have a right old go at the roving males, you know, so the monogamous males have a go at the roving males, keep them at bay, while, you know, another group of males goes and does some hunting and brings them back. Yeah, I mean, that's the kind of discussion you have in the pub, right? I mean, you know, how do you build that kind of strategy? No. Okay. No, of course you don't. So it's very unlikely that the males are going to come up with some kind of strategy in this, because, you know, I mean, they're basically, it's the two male strategies are completely at odds. let's look on the female side. So those females with who have their mothers still around, are in a great position. They've, their mothers are helping them out, and they are, they have males who are very attracted to them, not actually looking at them, but looking at their mothers. But anyway, hey, they're willing to go along with that. The other females are in an absolutely appalling situation. From the onset of menarche amongst those females, they, with no mother around, they are just, their life is going to be an absolute, complete and utter misery. They are not going to have reproductive success. They won't be able to bring up their offspring. They're going to have these roving males who are not going to put any input whatsoever into it. And anyway, even if they were successful in having an offspring, it's likely that those roving males are going to end up committing infanticide on it. So, it's like completely no good. Right. Okay. I'll finish in a minute then. Who is going to come up with the strategy that is going to solve this huge problem? A huge problem, I might add, that the genetics suggests that modern human population size dipped to about 10,000. I mean, our species nearly went extinct. It was a close thing. So I argue this is a really big problem that needs to be solved. And who on earth is in the best position to have a look over the group of 150 and see how can you possibly deal with all these problems of roving males, of females that don't have mothers with input, even those males that, are contributing. How do they go out and actually get the provisioning and bring it back and so on? Who are the females? No, sorry, I'm giving it away. Who are the individuals who can possibly come up with a strategy? Guess who?
Yes.
Grandma, of course, because their strategy is about reproductive success of their daughters and what they can see across. And Camilla and I are arguing, and other people obviously do as well, that what we're looking at least with modern humans, is a matriarchal system, insofar as females have to stick with their mothers. I mean, otherwise, game over. Humans would be extinct. So human females are with their mother, and those grandmas are looking over and realizing that the current strategy doesn't work. What's the best way of not only dealing with the problems on the female side, but also the problems on the male side? What do you need to do? As soon as, and if it is matrilocality, i.e. the females staying with their mothers kind of thing, then a lot of these females are actually going to be related to each other. What do you do if a female doesn't have their mother around? Bring them in. Bring them over. It's like, don't leave them on the outside. Bring them in, and you can provide some help. They're not your daughter, okay, but maybe they're your niece, or maybe your cousin, or something or other like that. So I'm arguing, and I hope I'm fitting in now with the arguments that are put forward and have been for so many years within RAG, that the grandmothers ensure that all the females are brought into this, female cosmetic coalition. They're all brought into this coalition, and the point at which they need to be brought in, obviously, is menarche. That's, before that, they can be girls and run around with the boys and, who cares? Doesn't matter. As soon as they hit menarche, no, they need to be within this coalition. But the best thing about it is it's not only a protection for those females, it now lets the males off the hook. Because if you've got a protection, a coalition protecting all these females, then the males don't have to be concerned anymore. They can then go out and do the hunting, knowing that all the females that they leave behind are going to be protected within this coalition. Effectively, a coalition that had in the past been used to protect against predators is now going to be the coalition that protects against the roving males. And I think this could be the way that this awful situation that early modern humans or near Heidelbergensis or whatever found themselves in was to come up with this solution. I would love to do some agent-based modeling and to see, how exactly this works out. And is there any other solution? I can't think of any other solution to that problem. The males most definitely couldn't come up with a solution. I think the females who are having kids and lactate, I mean, God, any female here who's had babies, knows, you're totally caught up in doing that. The only people are the grandmas who can see across and see what is the problem, and bring all the females at menarche into the coalition, and then you're also protecting the males, and the roving males really, it's not a strategy anymore. It's pretty useless. I mean, I think that maybe the gene for sitting on your ass, smoking a fag, having a beer, and watching TV managed to carry on. I'm not saying that it completely went away, but within that situation, it doesn't pay anymore. So you're better off actually having the chance of reproductive success, and it may not be your own grandma, but within the coalition you are being helped out. Now, I just want one last thing. Is that possible?
Yeah, go on.
The return of the roving male, and this is what I'm hoping to kind of start this project. So I support Chris's view that basically for 190,000 years there was this coalition, that out of the coalition came language and culture and all these kinds of things. Basically the grandmas were in control. I would say that for the whole of that time, they were the ones that, amazing woman in the picture before, were running the show, and they were keeping it all like that. And about 10,000 years ago, I think they started to lose their position. Things started to go wrong. I'm not exactly sure how things started to go wrong, but I think we then saw bit by bit the return of the roving males. And this turned into basically kind of protection rackets, mafia style. I mean, now they give it the grand title of the state, but these are basically roving males who have taken over. And look at them now, across the other side of the pond. Don't they exactly look like this lot here? And that's what they are. And if only
they think it's eugenics.
Well, it's it's the mating. Yes, it is a reproductive strategy. It is, and it's because effectively the grandmas lost their control. I mean, they had it for 190,000 years. I mean, give them their due. Pretty amazing. They just need to get it.
Learn the grandmas.
Oh, God. I know, a bit better than that. Sounds as though Chris has his hand up first. Let me.
And hearing all the time that I was talking, I felt.
Okay,
Oh
I mean, that
my
was
God, I forgot.
marvelous, as it always is. Just the way you presented it was so fantastic. Obviously, you can't say everything in an hour and a bit.
Was it that long? Sorry.
So, in a way, it's a shame we weren't able to say anything about language.
Oh, I know.
Much of it aside.
Well, yeah, that was
Yeah,
part
I
of
mean, I
the
understand. I mean, really, I'm serious. It's not a criticism. I'm more interested in pointing out one or two things. I mean, first of all, I mean, obviously you must know this, but it's just like there's quite a lot of infanticide among British, for example, quite often by females. So when the female moves away, she's, you know, the resident female, you know, doesn't want her anywhere near her, and then she gets hassled and quite violent. Sometimes her baby will be killed, and there's all that stuff going on.
For sure. Yeah.
So, but that's a cost of having to move out in the first place. So one of the points, which, and again, it's just obviously you can't say everything, but you often talk about the males, roving males, blah, blah, blah. And of course, there's a huge difference between males who are brothers or sons, and males who are outgroup males to any group of females.
Yes.
So, and I'm sort of partly talking to the room here as well as you. I'm not saying, you know, obviously nothing you know all about this, clearly. But what I'm more aware of increasingly is that in order for that fantastic transition to occur, just let me just say, all the people who talk about these things in linguistics and other things, evolution, they just say, oh, you know, we humans are great apes. Everyone knows that great apes are male philopathics, you know. Therefore, human males must be male philopathic. You know, the males who love the country, males stay put, forcing the females to move out. It's huge costs for females having to move away. When she has a mum, especially when she has her first baby, she hasn't got a mum there with her to give her advice, support, of breastfeeding, all the problems of, you know, having a baby. And as Sarah Hurley pointed out, that nothing becomes even a chimpanzee female more than finding a way not to move out, stick with mum, and then, you know, the cave family, all these things. The chimpanzee has the most number of offspring. There's one who managed to find a way of staying at home on coming of age instead of having to move out. And of course, you can't stay at home. I mean, all right, the reason why female apes move out, of course, is to avoid being hassled by their brothers or perhaps their fathers. It's to escape incest.
Yes.
So females couldn't move to sticking with mum, staying at home, without dealing with their male relatives and making them move out instead of them having to move out. So that's already, because it would have to be coalition. You couldn't make your brothers and fathers move away unless you have your mother with you.
Yes.
You need a coalition of people to even make the males move away instead of you having to move away. So you've already got the beginning of female coalitions there, and you've also got the distinction between brothers and outgroup. And it's just such an important thing to realize, actually, that I think that I mean, I'm not just reading what you're saying about grandmothers being these things. It's like you wouldn't even have grandmothers until you switch the residence rule. Because only once you switch the residence rule that you as a young female are with your mum, and your mum is now an effective grandmother.
Yes.
Now,
yes.
I mean, I'm perfectly well aware, Kit, that you know all these things, and you can't do everything. That's one of those.
Yeah. Well, I think
Right.
that's
So,
absolutely right.
Can I just ask, Zoom people, did you hear what Chris said about the role of brothers, and how the question of, you know, how did you switch from females moving away from the risk of incestuous matings to females staying with their mothers, and the role of brothers was a significant role as against just roving males. Yeah.
And then
okay.
And then the sort of the next step finally is for males and females with their sons and brothers
to start ritual coalitions. Yeah.
And now you're gonna bring your brothers into your coalition.
So brothers and sons in the coalition in some respect. That is the critical bit. Jerome.
Well, I think you're absolutely right, and I think Camilla and I sort of made that argument that at least by Homo erectus time, for sure, that the, you know, that is the basis of the solution, which ends up with menopause. That you stick, you know, as a female, you stick with your mother. You can't possibly do it. Now, I agree, you know, people like Richard Wrangham and you know, all of that kind of lot, they look at chimpanzees where the males stay within the group and the females have to leave, and they look at, you know, some groups of modern humans now where it's patriarchal, but it's the patriarchality, it's the males staying in their natal group and the females coming in, and they say, oh well, obviously, you know, obviously it's the same, so we must have stuck with the same kind of setup. No, I think it is completely obvious that it was absolutely essential in order to grow this large brain that females had to stick with their mothers. They didn't have a choice about it. Obviously, it's a lot safer for females to stay within their natal group than having to wander off and, you know, try and find another group that will take them in. Yeah, for sure. It's better that way round. I mean, in terms of brothers and so on, yes, I mean, I think you're right. The question is, I mean, we do have you know, inbreeding avoidance, you know, across all primates, across, you know, probably most animals, and you know, it's probably the case that if the females are going to stick with their mothers, then the brothers are likely to be leaving and going to find females elsewhere. They do not want to mate with the females that they grew up with, basically, is the Westermarck effect. They want to go and find others to do. Language, I'm sorry. Yes, I mean, but I completely leave language to you. All, you know, language is a cheap signal that can only be used and can only develop if you have trust within the coalition. You can't get there any other way, and that's where all. I mean, I'm not a specialist on language evolution, but anything you ever hear, you know, even the great Robin Dunbar does not deal with this problem. It's the problem that it's a cheap signal, and frankly, you know, it's a cheap signal, and we have exactly the same issue now. You know, all this stuff about, you know, social media and you can't trust it, and of course you can't, because the information system itself is entirely untrustworthy. Of course you can't trust it. So you know, I mean, I know journalists get very hot under the collar about this, don't they, Hannah? And you know, they want the facts, and you know, that's the only thing that kind of matters. It's got to be the truth and so on. But the information system itself is not going to give you that. So whether it's language, whether it's writing, then change somewhat with printing, or whether it's computer technology, doesn't make any difference. The information system itself is completely untrustworthy in all of those cases. And it's only if you have built trust that you can possibly have that. So it would be absolutely impossible for language to evolve in a species that hadn't built that trust. It's not that chimpanzees are thick. You know, chimpanzees, quarter the size of our brain, okay, so, you know, that may be the case, but they're not stupid. And it probably is not a great idea, but, you know, some humans have brought up chimpanzees and bonobos from birth and kept them within their kind of family and brought them up. Guess what? They can do sign language. Yeah, they can. They can have kind of touch pads and have sign language, and you know, be talking mainly about food, of course, because that's what chimpanzees and humans are interested in. But you know, as you say, other things as well. So it's not that they're stupid, but when those chimpanzees who can perfectly easily do sign language go back to other chimpanzees, Of course, they're not gonna use it because there is no trust. In fact, chimpanzees have probably the most basic of communication across primates.
Yeah.
It's so basic. It's I mean, they hit trees and they go and that's about it. Why? Because they can't trust. So there is no point in them having, smaller brained vervet monkeys can have a call for an eagle and a call for a snake and a call for a leopard and so on. Chimpanzees can't, because they can't trust that the individual who is giving that call is actually.
They can do some snake alarms for
Yeah,
their mates.
okay, but
they don't have the same level of predators that vervets do. That means
for sure, but they have to stick with the very basic level because they can't trust any. And the smarter they are, as chimpanzees are very smart, the smarter they are, the more likely they're going to be able to see through any of the cheating and the lying and so on.
Too clever for words is what Chris said. It's exactly right.
Exactly.
And we've got a question from Jerome here. Jerome, great to see you.
Thank you so much, Kit. That was absolutely wonderful. Not many people, I suspect, will appreciate the elegance of the talk we've just heard, but really, thank you so much for compressing so much information into such an elegant story. I really enjoyed that, and I do apologize I couldn't make it. I've just had a very hectic day. But well, there are a couple of things I wanted to add, which just for people in the audience maybe who aren't familiar with James Woodburn's work on immediate return and delayed return, I think provides, exactly the explanation for why the roving male has returned. And, as you move into more seasonal environments, you have to start doing things like storage in order to survive those difficult periods. And it's in those moments that brute force becomes an asset to protect those resources. And then the right to distribute those resources suddenly gives those brutes authority and power to influence other people's behavior. And you can certainly see along the northwest coast of Canada and the Pacific, where you have these salmon rivers. If you don't have control over the salmon river, you quickly get, you die because you starve during the winter. So people even go and beg to become slaves in those hunter-gatherer communities just so they can get access to the salmon if they haven't got control of a river. So, there are clearly reasons why. What's shocking and surprising, perhaps, is just how widespread this roving male strategy and effective it's become in recent years. And as you quite rightly point out, is very distressing at our current juncture. What I just wanted to, I have a question which will come in a sec, but I just wanted to, you put a lot of weight on grandmothers, and I'm all for that. I do love grandmas, but why not music too? It's if you really want to attract people in, there's got to be some joy involved, and I think that music and that's where these female coalitions of beautiful women dancing and singing really becomes very attractive to even roving males, and they start to acquiesce and do things nicely because they want to have access to those beauties. And it's quite interesting that across, at least in sub-Saharan Africa, among egalitarian hunter-gatherers, it's very often women who dominate the singing and the music scene, and men come in as sort of additional dancers or maskers to accompany them. But the women are the ones who really hold the music together, and I think that that's probably part of that grandma strategy that you're referring to. But my real question is about hunting. And I was slightly surprised that you sort of talk about the female coalitions as enabling men to go hunting. But from my understanding, men went hunting long before coalitions, or are you proposing, or at least long before Homo sapiens? So how do you fit that sort of prior to Homo sapiens hunting strategies working and operating? Or is it something that these women's coalitions were already developing well before Homo sapiens? You're, I presume, talking about Erectus. So whenabouts is it that these coalitions starting to develop, and why did it take so long for them to be so successful that they could, release encephalization to Homo sapien proportions?
Thanks, Jerome. I did come round the corner and knock on your door just in case you were in.
No, sorry.
Before we started, hoping you might be around. Wow, yes. Singing, for sure. I mean, I'm doing it from your paper. Exactly that. Yes, the strategy that was there in order to deal with the predators at night. You then reverse that strategy, or you use that strategy then on the internal predators, the roving males. You use exactly those things, the choral singing, the all of that kind of stuff. I mean, I'm sure it's the females who are doing that. I've been part of a choir, and always felt that the male kind of bases, it's really an add-on, really, isn't it, to the actual voices that are out there. And I just think the grandma would be the conductor. She would be the one who would be the center of it, deciding when it was going to happen, noticing when it was necessary, the one who could see what was happening to the moon, and what was happening to the blood, and what was happening to the hunt being brought in, and when young females were approaching menarche, and all of those things. It was the grandmas that could see that. It was the females beyond menopause who were not completely spending all their time, worrying about their particular infants, and how they were growing, and would they be able to get enough food, and all of those kinds of things. It was the older females who could look out beyond that. You talk about the hunting strategy. Okay, yeah, there must have been some way that meat, I mean, using Leslie Aiello and Kathy Key's view on this, it was only possible to grow a brain probably as big as Homo erectus, but certainly as big as Heidelbergensis and then humans, if you have meat. I mean, let's be absolutely plain about this. You can't grow those size brains without having meat. Now, Leslie Aiello comes up with some interesting stuff, suggesting that scavenging is not the most awful thing in the world. Scavenging is actually pretty hard. Lions do it, leopards do it, eagles do it, hyenas do it. It's a really difficult thing to do. And Homo erectus societies would have had Schulian hand axes, which would have enabled them to get at the brains, at the spinal cord, at marrow, all really, really good food for growing large brains. But scavenging. Now, it's possible, I mean, this is where I guess kind of agent-based modeling, maybe I'm putting too much hope out there, but possibly you could start sort of seeing, well, what's another way of doing hunting when the males know that if they leave the female, who is certainly, or in inverted commas, certainly bringing up their infant, is going to be safe while the male goes off to do some hunting. Is there some kind of strategy that is possible? And I dare say there was. I mean, I'm not saying there wasn't a possible strategy. And maybe we can help out a few Tory politicians at this point. Maybe that was the beginning of the family. Maybe you have, movement of, maybe a grandmother, a number of daughters with their infants, a number of the males who are associated there, even a brother or two, and so on. And maybe this is a kind of a roving band that could have engaged in some kind of hunting while at the same time protecting the long lactating infants from the infanticidal males. I don't know. I think that's something that perhaps we can work on and try and work out, because Homo erectus must have had a strategy, and I think it was only modern humans that had the strategy that then fitted in with Chris's theory. I don't think it was a previous species. It was modern humans that hit this. So the coalition strategy, if you like, was the one that ended or enabled the coalition of trust, and therefore a cheap signal to come out of it, and culture and all the rest of it. But maybe there was other kinds of strategies before that just didn't cut it any longer with the very large brain that modern humans have.
Thank you.
Thanks, Jerome. We'll have you go, and then I'll let you go.
Camilla, because you mentioned eating brain matter, I often ask myself, why is it, for instance, Homo sapiens, there is this fairly constant population frequency between males and females. And once you have that question in your mind, you can then ask a very obvious question, which is in very strong matriarchy. Why don't mothers kill a lot of their male children, and that way they handle all
Such a good question.
patriarch? I mean, this is such an obvious thing to do. You don't need very powerful symbol systems or rich language. You could just kill males, and so it makes sense. Now, but there are two questions there. One, what is it about 23rd pair XY sex determination systems that seems to churn out this 50-50 split? That's a very interesting question. But secondly, I mean, ancestors need to understand that question. They could just kill sufficient numbers of males to solve all the problems that your model has presumed. Now, so when you throw out when you throw out these hypotheses, you can look at them in two ways. Why wasn't this actually done? Or maybe it was done, just the data people turned a blind eye, typical patriarchy. Secondly, in trying to fill in the gaps,
to do it again.
Filling in the gaps in the fossil record, well, this theory generates the kind of data we want to go looking for. But much more interesting, because I'm quite a radical feminist Marxist, if we want to use our anthropology to answer our political problems today, what is it that stops women just deciding, well, we're all going to kill most of our male offspring? Nothing unlawful about that yet. And but more to the point, you can use sophisticated biochemistry to prevent 23rd pair XY zygotic formation. So you can use perfectly legitimate systems now to tone down the nasty problem we have now. So now you've got this problem in your mind, what's the answer?
Well, I think Camilla wants to say something about this. Go on.
About this. That is putting me right in mind of Richard Wrangham's goodness paradox whole idea in relation to domestication. And the idea that we reduce what happened in the course of Homo evolution from erectus to Heidelbergensis or antecessor to all those who were descended from Neanderthals, Denisovans, ourselves, was a certain level of reduction of aggression, reduction of instinctive aggression, being particularly in the Homo sapiens lineage, being selected for to some extent. And Richard Wrangham's got the idea that it was men who did it all, men who did the selecting by, if anybody got out of hand with out of order behavior, they would be killed off. So men were doing the killing to enable only men who could, so the only violence that was enabled or selected for was planned coalitionary violence by men. And of course, this idea is profoundly stupid because it's leaving out the grandmas. So why on earth would grandmas be doing the same thing there that Richard Wrangham is proposing to kill off males as a whole? Can I finish? Excuse me. So there is a simple way that grandmas, plus all their sisters, plus their daughters, plus their can kill any misbehaving male, is say, no, sorry, not you.
No sex.
No sex. We like them. Not you. We like them. And they express it, as Jerome says, by singing, dancing beautifully, singing beautiful songs, but saying, oh, these old men, their balls are broken. We're penis is useless. We have the cunts have power. So yeah, they're singing very rude words whilst being so beautiful and so enjoyable and everything. It's going to be I mean, Richard Wrangham's idea that men were doing the selecting against violent men, instead of the idea that women don't need to kill anyone. They just get together and decide which males they like. And the males that behave that way get the rewards of sex, infants who survive, and it begins to feed back and it begins to roll. Quite clearly, Sarah Hrdy's cooperative breeding model must be, I mean, grandmas are wrapped up in that, which makes it not only grandma alone, but goes kind of spreads around. So hunter-gatherer camps are collective childcare machines where who's actually grandma of who doesn't matter that much.
Yeah.
Actually, now, today, it wouldn't in African hunter-gatherer camps. And Kristen Hawke's team, the grandmother team, they noted in their key paper on the emergence of grandmother strategy on the hardworking, what was the I can't remember the title off the top of my head now. Noticed that every single mother breastfeeding had a postmenopausal woman helping, who wasn't necessarily an actual grandma, as you say. She could be like a great aunt, she could be like even great grandmother. There were even some on the father's side, possible, but mostly on the mother's side. But it had got to a stage where almost any possibility would work by that stage. But quite clearly in the beginning, and with Sarah Hrdy's cooperative breeding idea, just the very fact that a woman could hand over a baby to another female, which really doesn't happen with great apes at all. And that had to be mother-daughter in the beginnings, really had to be. And that's explaining why great apes just can't go down this route, really, with the patriarchality. Yeah. So yeah, I just think the idea women would be killing off, or grandmas would be killing off some of the offspring of their daughters because there are just lots of other ways. And the cooperative breeding part of it would generate behaviors of the kind like the Muadjo behaviors that Jerome's taught us so much about, the ridicule behaviors and teasing behaviors that could incorporate. The first males incorporated that would be the brothers of that would be quite close in age to sisters as well. So I think that's an important aspect to integrate.
For sure.
Yeah.
Well, I think once the coalition is put together, then of course all those things are possible. I mean, it's no longer necessary that the matriarchal line is the only way in which infants are looked after. If once they're in, once they're in, they're in, and you hold on to that. I think that the thing about the males is that the roving male strategy is actually useless. That's the problem.
That is the problem.
It's because the roving males are managing to mate with females who are, at that time outside of the coalition is not across the whole of the society, and therefore those roving males are able to mate with those females, but there's not going to be any reproductive success out of it. You know, and the reproductive success is going to be within the coalition or within the group. So, you know, so if Homo erectus has these, you know, matriarchal, as we were suggesting, matriarchal kind of setups, then that's where the males are going to have their reproductive success. And so, of course, the best male strategy is going to be that way. And therefore, yes, it's going to be the males who are willing to do that, who are going to be part of it. Just males may not have a whole life strategy. Can I put it that way? Females are not going to have not necessarily have a whole life strategy. They may change between, you know, in a pre-coalitionary setup. It may be that the male kind of starts off being very, you know, collaborative, working with the female, it's their offspring and what have you, and then kind of goes off and does, you know, maybe the grandmother dies, and the female, you know, is unlikely, and he goes and does something else. But I'm not saying that, you know, it's like every male, you know, is either like that or is like that. You know, these are strategies. You know, we have very complex minds, and we respond, I think, to the structures that we are living in. If we grow up in a hunter-gatherer group where there is singing and dancing and cooperative childcare and all of that kind of thing, that will speak to, will encourage, will, you know, take us down a particular route. You know, at some point, yes, I agree with you, Jerome, that, you know, it probably is some underlying, you know, effectively economic change that is going to undermine the grandmother's coalition. I'm a bit I don't know. I just want to dig a bit more because I'm not entirely satisfied with that idea, and want to sort of pull it apart a bit. I guess for me anyway, it's a bit too simple that we have storage, and the strategy that lasted 190,000 years suddenly doesn't work anymore. And I'd like to kind of have a bit of a but at some point, yes, the coalition did fall apart for some reason, which allows for those roving males to go off and set up the mafia protection rackets, you know, which have ruled the planet ever since. And until it's not about getting rid of those males. I mean, yes, you know, it's a real problem that you know a couple of people with rifles weren't very good shots this summer. You know, but that's not the solution. You know, that is not the solution to these problems. It's not about, you know, grandmas killing their reproductive success. You know, that doesn't happen, and it's not the solution. What you want is to find, you know, the next coalition. Basically, we need to find the next coalition, and, you know, who's going to be in the vanguard. You know, and, you know, the SWP might have one particular view on that, and others might have a different one, and perhaps, you know, perhaps the vanguard, you know, are the grandmothers. I don't know. I'll just leave it out there.
We'll go for that. All right. I'm going to ask Kevin now, because you've had a talk.
I'll just have a really quick comment, because the question I think was asked, why is the sex ratio 1:1? And we do have an answer to that. And it was worked out by Ron Fisher, John Maynard Smith, and people like that. And it's not even because we've got X and Y chromosomes. Quite really, why we have X and Y chromosomes is because that produces a 1:1 sex ratio. And the reason we have a 1:1 sex ratio is because every individual who's born in a human or most animal population has one father and one mother. And once you have that system, once you have sperm and eggs and one father and one mother, then the evolutionary stable strategy is basically to have a one-to-one sex ratio. Even a female who wants to have lots of offspring, once the males are rare, the female wants to have male offspring.
It's extra
So-
males, yes.
However,
Yeah.
if I can play devil's advocate, that assumes that people can't have social superseding of what you might call biological necessity. Now, I don't.
But it
think
is the
that.
reason why we have a one-to-one sex ratio in the human population, and why why females in the past who have left descendants haven't killed all their male offspring.
But I think that's begging the question, just to press the point. So why shouldn't women have attempted to supersede what you describe as a biological necessity?
They're two different questions. Like I did this.
So there is a way around it, which is to have asexual reproduction, and there are obviously lots of species that have asexual reproduction, but the ones that are sexual, that reproduce sexually, they have a one-to-one sex ratio in general. And then the exceptions are haplodiploid species, where you have males that have only mothers and females that have a mother and a father. And that was all worked out by Bill Hamilton.
Use social wasps and bees, etc.
But for the sake of it, I think your explanation of why the organism would decide to is great. Like I think you're really clear, and I think it does answer in some ways the question you asked. Although then you're asking a second question. It's like, okay, the organism maybe decides one thing, but then why couldn't people, coalitions, just decide to do something else? The way like states, there have been gender selected infanticide in states in China, because of social reasons. And it's technically possible that women, even though it's not what we want or what we see in the historical record or what, chimpanzees tell us we must do, it is technically possible that women could get together and decide, you know what? But that's a very scary idea, which is why you're getting a lot of flack.
I like it.
Well, you like it, but it's terrifying to people that women would decide to do the kinds of things that men do, and so it's
Would not be an
scary.
evolutionarily stable strategy having your descendants.
But that requires proof.
You must start with basic sociobiology. If you want to do astronomy, you at least got to know something about Newton and Einstein before you get moving on more sophisticated
There are plenty of myths about women killing their offspring, Amazon-style myths, and Jerome, of course, the Evangeli stories about women with regional owners of Ejengi, and they don't have the Ejengi, they produce the children, which are girl children, or is that right? So, I mean, there are many stories of that kind. But they all
used to repress women, like the
or
patriarchal
they
stories
may
about
be
men
used
killing women in order to kill and repress women. So of course, what you're raising is just a very scary set of ideas, right? Like, even if it's not,
but it's men are not the problem.
Yes, they are.
No,
they're not
No,
necessarily
they're
the
not the
problem. They're
problem.
not in
They're not the problem.
egalitarian hunter-gatherer societies. The problem. They're part of the solution.
no.
The problem now.
It's the strategy that's
Men are
the problem.
definitely a problem. Certain men are a problem.
The whole theory of evolution that in a way, I don't want to simplify, but it is a lot of the stuff behind what you're saying presumes a kind of male individualism. It presumes like you actually are kind of the man, because the male, the great ape, the male in this scenario, we're presuming that he only cares about reproduction of the self. That's why he kills the kids of other things, right? There's an idea that the male has got this interest in self-reproduction and the self, and is very individualist, and that's the premise on which a lot of the other arguments and stuff is based. And that's fine, but it does suggest that, well, if men, if women are inherently, or something inherently about women's bodies leads us to then be collectivist in general, there's something about the theory that suggests that men are individualist in general, and that's why women have to be collectivist. And in some ways defends your point. Like I can see where you come with well, then why aren't we? What's?
Well,
I think it's a legit question. I think it's a complicated question.
I do attention to chimpanzee female infanticide precisely to counter that idea. Females commit infanticide against rival females among many chimps where the resources are scarce and the females they don't want to mess with each other, they keep separate. Then a female doesn't want an immigrant female coming into a patch and will kill her baby. It's quite, a lot of literature on that.
There is, and there's even some cases now in bonobo. There's some suggestion with Volker about bonobos being such actually competitive mothers, tiger mother. In fact, they can be breastfeeding for long periods with 2 offspring actually, which is something new.
Right. And also from the male point of view, the males are not killing rivals.
Yeah.
That's not what they're doing. So if they were killing rivals, they would kill them at any age, all the way up until they started to get to be a bit of a threat. So, you know, kind of approaching adulthood. No, they are simply trying to get more reproductive possibilities. That's what they're after. So it's a reproductive strategy. You know, Sarah Hrdy laid it out completely clearly. It's not competition. It is not. It's about them having reproductive success. And if they can't find any fertile females, then the best way that they can get a fertile female is to kill the offspring of that female in order that they can mate. It's not about killing a rival's offspring. So when the gorilla takes over of a group, it's not that he's killing off all his rivals' offspring. It's that he's scared to death that he's going to be booted out before his offspring can get beyond weaning. That's the problem. so
we have to say his body is scared to death. I mean, we have to realize these aren't thinking.
No, not thinking. No,
not
strategy.
thinking, no.
This is the strategy.
Bodies which don't get their deep into the future, they're not around.
They're not around anymore.
And they won't be around.
So it's the strategies that are the problem. It's not, you know, to say it's a male problem. No, it's not. Well, it's not an evolutionary approach. And you're a philosopher, so fine. Take that approach. But we are evolutionary anthropologists, so we're using evolution as our way of looking at it, and it's the strategy that's the problem.
Let me make one reminder.
A good, helpful male, or is it rude?
Yeah, it sure is.
There is a difference.
Yeah, and that's what, you know, females are very happy to have, you know, males around that, you know, are contributing and so on. And, you know, within monogamous pairs, you know, the main difficulties is that, you know, the female kind of keeping the male on the ticket, you know, and not putting their feet up and drinking the beer and watching the football.
Her mother helps an enormous amount with that to make sure the bride service gets done.
Of course.
And all the mother, and you talked about the grandmothers being this very attractive older ladies, but of course there's a big mother-in-law avoidance. So all that stuff about mother-in-law and sons-in-law is
because I think it's flipped.
Yeah,
it's flipped
since
Wrangham.
Mother-in-law has always been there.
That is big start. That is deep.
The mother-in-law needs to be untouchable.
Because it's most important for her. It's most important for her to have so much authority that she can, you know, she can call her. She's like the line manager for her, or the union rep for her daughter. Call her out on sex drive, which is what happens with a Hadza camp. You know, if the guy is not doing his job right. You've had enough of my daughter now. Everybody, please. That was a pretty stunning, amazing talk. Getting us going. Kit, thank you so much. With that, I think we'll be carrying on long into the night in the pub with further discussion for anybody who wants to come. Which we are going to the Tavistock Hotel. You're able to come, are you? Or have you got to take your trip? Come for a show quickie, at least down at the bottom end of Tavistock Square, just round. We'll be going down there. We have one more talk next week, so I just wanted to say this while we've got the Zoom people here, from our colleague from University of Plymouth, Ivan Tacey. And we've had today wonderful evolutionary anthropologist from Bristol. Ivan Tacey is social anthropologist, hunter-gatherer anthropologist with the Batek. He's going to be looking at serpentine cosmopolitics, a cross-cultural review of rainbow snake symbolism, which is should be a absolutely wonderful talk as well. And we'll be investigating shamanistic aspects of that with his own fieldwork as well. So do please come back for more for next week, which will be the same time, same place, same Zoom again next week. Anybody can, anybody who's here tonight, please do come and hear that. And that'll be our last one before Easter. We have got a couple of events operating after Easter, but we might break out from this space in UCL and do it in like top of the pub type spaces. One event is on a Monday, April 29th, 28th.
Monday, April 28th, at the Two Chairman Pub.
We'll tell the details about that, and we'll put events up.
Poetry reading,
Poetry reading, yeah. And we're also likely to be, we are working, the grandmothers are working on coalitions, and more to come, and witches are back. And we are generating menstrual huts at the dark moon, and we are likely to do an event where have all the menstrual huts gone, which may also go to a nice pub space to have a sort of circle event rather than an in academic forum event. So we'll probably do that sometime in May, before the May dark moon. So we'll put up these events, watch our space on social media and so forth, and they'll be there. But yeah, say goodbye to everybody on Zoom, and the rest of us are going down the pub, or else going home if we have to go and feed the cat. Bye everybody. Thank you, Joe, and thank you all.
Bye. Thank you, Camilla. Bye.
Bye.
Thank you.